guys, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Robbie Cassidy, and in this episode of the podcast, we're going to look at 8 different ways you can improve the productivity of your gym sessions. Okay, and the reason I want to talk about this, or I guess one of the reasons that I want to discuss this a small bit more, is that a lot of people build up a very consistent habit of going to the gym, but then they're not getting the results they want in the gym. And a lot of it comes down to the productivity side of things, in that they're either maybe not doing enough in there, or they are spending their time doing things that aren't as effective as they should be. So in this episode, I want to talk a bit about what you can do to improve the productivity of it so that you get more out of every session. Okay? And if you haven't listened to this podcast before, as I said, my name is Robbie Cassidy. I'm a physiotherapist and athletic therapist, and I work with people with long-term injuries. And really what we're looking to do is try to promote balance and give you a better understanding of different things you can do, and always looking to give you practical tips on things that you can do to implement into your training sessions, into your life, and different habits that you can build to get the most out of it. So to not delay any further, I'll jump straight into the podcast and we can start to talk about them. So number 1, the very first thing that anyone, I think, that is starting to has a good habit or a good consistent habit of going to the gym, I think you need to look at structuring your sessions beforehand. Now, even if you don't have a consistent habit of going to the gym and you're kind of on and off at times, it's still a really effective way of getting more out of every session. And I think we're all guilty of it, of just landing up to the gym with no real plan of action of what we're going to do, what exercises we're going to do, what order we're going to do them in. And then as a result, you're walking around trying to think off the top of your head, oh, I might do the bench, and then I might do some bicep curls, and then I might do a small bit of abs, and I'll get on the bike. And you haven't really got the most out of that session then, because you were kind of just going with the flow and just picking and choosing random things. But I guess it comes back to the goal of the session. Sometimes those sessions can be good just to help clear the head, but long term, you're not going to get the results you want doing that and doing things like that. So it's so much better to structure your session beforehand so you know exactly what exercises you're doing. And that may be you reach out to a coach, or it could be that you just write them down on your phone. Okay? The other problem about doing it is if you don't do it that way, what's going to happen is that you're going to favor some exercises. And if you favor certain exercises over the long term, what will happen there is that you're obviously just going to get really strong at certain exercises, and then other ones are going to be completely neglected. And when it comes to performance, when it comes to aesthetics, you can't have that. You don't want to be the person who has the really big chest and the small legs, or the person who just has a big butt and nothing else. Because aesthetically, even though that may be something that you're going for at the start, it's not the best option long term. And when we're in the gym, I think the gym is a long term plan. It's a long term habit that you want to build. It's not something that you want to just get in and get out of. For me anyway, and for a lot of people that I work with, it is. So I think that's really, really important. Know exactly what you're doing before you go in, and then it just makes it so much easier to get through the session in time. So you're not spending 2 hours, 2.5 hours there, as well as it takes less mental energy out of the gym. So when you actually do your session, you will get more out of it because you're going to be more likely to push harder with different exercises, because you're not using that energy trying to figure out where you're going to set up, what you're going to do, what exercises you're going to do, what the next ones are. Is that person over there working with that machine? When they're finished, I'm going to jump over that for a quick set and come back. Okay, so there's a lot of mental energy expended when you don't have a plan going into the gym. So that is number 1. That's the very first one we want to look at. Structure your session in advance. Number 2, one thing that I often see, and I think everybody who goes to the gym is guilty of this, I am myself, is avoiding your phone when you're in the gym. Now, it's okay if you have it because you have your session laid out and you want to know what you're going to do, and there's no problem with that. But if you, every time you do a set, you sit down, pull out your phone straight away, first off, think of the amount of time that takes. Because often, if you do, I can imagine, because if you're into like myself, you'll open it up and you go on Instagram and you start scrolling. And instead of a 90-second rest period, it then becomes a 3 to 4 minute rest period when it should only be that 90-second mark, depending on what your goals are, obviously. And then, as a result, you're spending way too much time in the gym. You're letting your, mind drift completely. So your focus and your concentration goes away. So you kind of have to refocus every time. And then, as well as that, it just, as I said, it's a different level of concentration. It really does take from your session if you spend a load of time on it. Now, there's no problem if you're just pulling it out, checking a few things and then putting it back in. No real issue with that. It's the ones where you take it out and you get caught in a video sequence, or you get caught watching a certain amount of videos, and then 5 minutes have passed when really only a minute should have passed, or 2 minutes should have passed. And then your gym sessions are getting longer and longer and longer, and obviously less productive. So I would say to, as much as possible, try to avoid it. If it's me, in a lot of situations, I probably look like a psycho, but I like to just sit there. If I have music on or a podcast on, just sit down and stare at the floor. I think that's a big one for me anyway. It's what I like to do. For someone else, it could be just going over, getting a drop of water, having a little walk around and coming back. But going straight for the phone in the gym between exercises, and I think a lot of the time it's just people are self-conscious. They're not comfortable sitting down by themselves and just looking at the ground. But it is a good habit to get into, because you're not always wasting time between every set. Okay, and then you might even fit, as what I'll talk about in the next couple of ones, different exercises in that time as well. The next one actually comes back to timing as well. And what we're looking at with this one is making sure that you have a set time when you go into the gym. That basically means that once you're done, you're done. So going in for 60 minutes or going in for 90 minutes is huge, because it helps you to, you're a lot more accountable to the time that you've set out. So I think a lot of people actually benefit from this. It's probably one of the most beneficial ways to improve productivity in the gym, because you're not then looking to, or I should say you are then looking to get out of there at a specific time. Because if you just keep dragging it out, you're going to find that you'll spend a lot longer in between sets, sitting down, resting, just dilly-dallying, for lack of a better word. And as a result, then you're obviously not getting the same out of that session. So making sure that you're very strict on timing and have a set timing when you go in and out is, I think, a prime way of straight away improving your productivity off the bat. Sorry guys if you can hear a bit of an echo. It's just the room I'm recording in at the moment is a pretty large room, so I'm just noticing that there is an echo in the podcast, so I do apologize for that. But to push on with it a small bit more, I guess the next one that we are looking for is to superset your exercises as much as you can. So what I mean by superset is basically, you know that if you're going for a bench press, that you might be adding a bicep curl or a tricep push down, or it could be an ab exercise with that as well. It could be that you do a back squat and then a Russian twist and an isolation exercise. 1, 2, 3. This idea as supersetting exercises is a great way of getting more in the time that you have, as opposed to doing 4 by 6 on the back squat and then finishing up and moving on and doing 4 by 5 on the bicep curl, and then moving on and doing 4 by 5 on whatever other exercise you're going to do. But really, really, really important to, as best you can, when it aligns with the goal that you have, to try to superset exercises, because you can get a lot more done in that time. Okay, and it also can help you to rest certain areas. So that's why I was saying, if you're doing a back squat, probably not the best thing to superset back squat with Bulgarian split squat, because it's working very similar muscle groups, while using it for maybe a single leg calf raise or an ab exercise or an upper body exercise, you'll get more out of it then. Then tying into that superset idea is looking at the idea of blocking exercises to a zone where possible. So now this can be difficult if you're in a new gym or if you're in a busy gym where you don't have the time or space to just kind of block a certain set of exercises off. But it can still work if you know let's say your squat rack is close to the dumbbells and you know there's a bench in front of you and you're able to go from the squat rack to the bench, or you might have a medicine ball, bring it over with you. So you want to do your back squat and then you want to do your Russian twist at the same time. At least then you don't have to walk to a different part of the gym and you're able to just keep it all within your zone. Now you have to be conscientious about people around you, because you don't want to be the person who ties up 3 or 4 different machines and no one's allowed to use them, because you need to be respectful obviously to the people around you as well. But as best you can, try to keep a zone in the gym so that you know that you're working within a zone for a certain number of exercises and then you move out of it. And you'll be surprised with how much that will improve your just overall session, because I do often see people jumping from one area to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and not really planning their session and planning out their zones. And then they're losing so much time in between each of those. So I think you can get a lot more out of it by just keeping your zone where possible, obviously. So it could be like bench press beside the tricep pull down machine, and then on the same bench you might be just working with the bicep curl or lateral raise. So keep the equipment that you're using close to you once it's respectful, obviously. Now, the last few are, I guess, I've mentioned them as we've kind of gone throughout the podcast, but just I want to talk about them by themselves as well. Is it's really important to know your goal when you go into the gym. And what I mean by that is your goal, let's say, weight loss or body recomp? Is it more of a performance thing that you're in the gym because you're working on a different sport? Is it for strength, speed, hypertrophy? Sorry, I said that wrong. Or are you just getting in there to get a session done? If you know your goal and intention, it helps you to plan your session a lot better. And then you know the amount of effort and sacrifice you have to give to each exercise. So if the goal of the session is a leg dominant session, then you obviously want to spend more time on your leg machines. Okay, standard. I think we know that. That's a very basic example. But if it is a strength session or a power session, well, you're going to have to allocate more time for resting. Okay? If it is a hypertrophy session where you're trying to add a load of size, you have to allocate more time towards getting more sets done. So it really depends on what the goal of your session is. And knowing what the goal of your session is going in there, it could be just, I know a lot of people that just say, I want to go in and sweat it out. Well, if that's the case, you can probably spend more time on the cardio equipment in the gym. If that is the goal, because you will get, obviously you'll break a sweat on that, and you might just organize a couple of exercises around it. But if you're saying that I want to go in there for strength and speed, and then you're spending 15 minutes on the rower, well, it doesn't align. Okay? So, or hypertrophy, and you're spending loads of time on the rower. It doesn't really align. So knowing what the goal is for each session is really important. And if it means that you're stuck for time and you have to get in there, that means prioritizing the most important movements first. So like your compound movements maybe, where you are looking to get, your compounds are like your back squat, your deadlift, your RDL, your bench. If you prioritize those first, especially when it comes to performance, that's a great way of, like, when you're stuck for time, a great way of getting more out of your session than when you are under a strict time limit. Okay, so I would always say, know your goal, have an intention when you get in there, because it will drastically improve your sessions and you'll be surprised with how much it will. After that one, to be more productive in your gym session, record your weights. Like, record what you're lifting in a book or on your phone. Just this simple little trick will, in the long run, make a huge difference to the performance you're getting out of the gym, or performance you're putting into the gym and the results you're getting out of it. It'll make a massive difference. You'll be so surprised just by jotting down what you are doing. So it could be that you're benching 50 kilo one week, 55 the next, 57 the next. But what a lot of people will do is they'll get stuck in the habit of just doing the same weights week in, week out, and then they will hit that plateau and they'll wonder why. And a lot of the times they'll look around to see what's gone wrong, and they'll start to assess things that may not have an effect at all, when really they just haven't been strict on recording their weights and then upping the weights. So knowing what you lifted before makes it a lot easier to reassess. When it comes to a performance, so if I'm working with clients, we'll look at their weeks and we'll say, okay, this is an RPE of, let's say, a 6 or a 7 or an 8 week, rate of perceived exertion, effort level of the week, basically. So we know that each session that week, or whatever sessions we have planned out for that week, we are looking for a certain level of effort in each of those. And that's down to blocking out your training in advance and knowing when there's deload weeks and when we're resting. So really important to do that when possible. And I think that if you don't record your weights on your phone or in a book, it's something that I would start in the morning, because it makes a huge difference. And I think the last one then is having a good understanding of a warm-up as well. This is a really good way of becoming more productive, because you're able to, if you structure your warm-ups right, you can get more out of your exercises when you're doing them. So know what exercises you're doing depending on the day that you're going into. So it could be that you have certain mobility exercises that you prefer and you like to work towards. Do you include cardio, or do you just use weights to warm up? There's a lot of things, a lot of factors here, and the better knowledge you have of what you have access to in your warm up, in terms of like the mobility exercises you have access to, the ones that you know, the ones that work, the bikes, the rowers, the skiers, if you have like a rack to yourself, it all makes a difference. But it really does depend on what you're doing, because if you're doing something like kettlebell swings, explosive kettlebell swings, you'll still have to start low and build up. But it might be better to get on the skier, get on the rower, or get on the bike, and have a bit more of an intense warm-up earlier on, as well as your movement and mobility. But if you're doing something like a heavy deadlift, it's a lot more important to start with a low bar and build it up, as well as having your few other exercises with that. But in general, if you're going for heavy deadlifts, I probably wouldn't be going on the skier or the rower or the bike myself, unless you like that transitional period where you can get your focus right. I usually just get in, do my exercises, like my mobility exercises, as a warm-up, and then I start working on the bar straight away at a low weight and starting to build that up to the point where I want to get to. So guys and girls, that is everything I want to talk about this week. They are the 8 ways to make your gym sessions more productive. And from start to finish, we're looking at structuring your sessions beforehand, avoiding your phone in the gym as much as possible, being very strict on the timing. So you have an hour or you have 90 minutes to work in, or 2 hours, whatever you want, and being strict on that. Supersetting exercises, so connecting different exercises together, and it'll help you to rest certain areas while you work others. Blocking exercises to a zone in the gym. Knowing your goal and intention, which is priority, one of the most important ones. Recording weights on a book or on your phone of what you're lifting week in, week out. And then setting a warm-up so you know what you're doing when you get in there, and you're not just sitting in the warm-up area looking around, looking on your phone, looking for different exercises and kind of messing around and spending 15-20 minutes when you could be doing something more important. So hopefully that helps you out, and if it did, I would love if you could send this to a friend, because it's the best way for me to promote the podcast is word of mouth and word of mouth referrals. So if you could, I would love if you could share it on your story or send it to a friend. I would also love if you could subscribe and rate the podcast, as it just helps me to grow it and get more guests on. But that is all from me today. If anyone is looking for a return to running protocol, if you just scroll go into the episode description here, scroll down to the bottom, you'll see it right at the bottom. It's a program you can download, and it just helps you to get back into running if you had a lower limb injury last year. It's a very simple way of building back up your running again. And it is getting around that time of the year to start looking at doing a bit more running very soon. But guys, that is all from me today. I hope everyone out there is doing well. And yeah, I look forward to chatting to you all again soon. Have a good one.